spectacular entrepreneur, welcome to the final day of this round of Tashmas on the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. It's day 12, which means, number one, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me. And also, I have another amazing episode of the podcast for you and an extra special gift. This is episode number 473 of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/473. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you what to do when your lead magnet is just too awesome. And I'll explain everything in the episode. Let's dive straight on in. Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money, and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Having a lead magnet that's just far too awesome is something that actually comes up a lot inside my takeoff program. And it usually goes down something like this. Number one, people want to create their freebie, right? Their lead magnet, their opt-in, whatever you want to call it. And then number two, the freebie idea grows into this giant product or course idea. And so the scope of the project, the scope of that free resource just expands and expands and expands. Then, number three, they feel like they can't really give this away for free. It's far too valuable. It's far too involved. It's far too good. And so they end up, number four, changing the entire model and moving it instead into a leveraged or passive product. But this was created to be a freebie. And in doing so, it was created to achieve a certain job and to fulfill a certain part of their strategy. And so now that they have this low-cost digital product or they have this new leveraged product, they still don't have the job that the freebie was supposed to do done. It's not been achieved. So this is really that scope creep. When you're creating a lead magnet and it has a certain job to do and you come up with a certain idea for that lead magnet, but the scope of it creeps and creeps and creeps and becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And what ends up happening is you create something that's far too awesome, or it's far too involved, or it's far too big, but now you don't have a lead magnet that actually does the job that a lead magnet needs to do in your business. First and foremost, we do want to understand that in a lot of cases, the reason this happens is because you have a lot to share. You have a lot to teach. You have a lot to say in your zone of genius. And so when you decide to create this lead magnet, it's very easy for the scope to creep and become bigger because of that wealth of knowledge and experience and ideas and advice that you want to share with your audience. But just because you have a lot to say and a lot to share doesn't necessarily mean that it all should be jammed into the one thing. Especially when you consider the job of a lead magnet is to grow your audience with hot leads. That's its job. And so if you are charging for that lead magnet because you've put so much into it, you are actually going to reduce the number of hot leads that you attract to your business in your audience. There are very few circumstances in which something that has a price tag has more people signing up and buying it than you would get if you gave it away as a free lead magnet. And so if the job of the lead magnet is to grow your audience with hot leads, you are actually limiting that lead magnet's ability to do that job if you put a price tag on it. Not only that, if you put too much information in the lead magnet, if that becomes bigger than it was ever intended to be, if instead of being something that people can complete within an hour of signing up for it, it's now an 8-module, 16-hour undertaking, less people are likely to sign up for it and less people are likely to complete it. And one of the biggest drivers of whether a lead magnet is attracting hot leads versus just growing your list with time wasters and people who aren't ready to work with you is the number of people who actually complete the lead magnet. One of the things that we need to be mindful of is maximizing completion, not just maximizing the number of people who sign up for it. So, if this has happened to you before, or you're in the midst of creating something and the scope is starting to creep out to be bigger and bigger, here's my advice on how we address that. Number one, remember that you don't have to put everything into one lead magnet. You don't have to put everything into one particular offer or service, not even when it's a paid product. Think about the way that people consume content and consume information. If people see that your lead magnet has 16 components in it and they only need half of them, then they are going to feel that they can only get 50% of the value. So in a lot of cases, you're better off, particularly with free content and particularly with lead magnets, creating multiple free things and having a smaller scope of each rather than trying to deliver on all of those things in one particular way. Number two, remember your lead magnet needs to have a high completion rate and do a good job of getting people to the point of being ready to buy from you. And in a lot of cases, that means limiting the scope of the lead magnet to being one specific journey, to one specific light bulb moment, and presenting one particular offer or upsell as the next logical steps. So we can then be very mindful of the way that you craft and structure that lead magnet to ensure that it's facilitating that light bulb moment and just focusing on getting people to complete it and being ready to even consider the next investment, the next steps of working with you, which is in most cases to buy something. Finally, find ways that you can ungate as much of your content as possible. I don't require people opt in or sign up for this podcast. It is ungated content. Now, of course, I do have a bunch of lead magnets, a bunch of free resources and things that people can opt in for to join my mailing list and grab those extra juicy insights and resources. But I'm very careful to ensure that I don't make everything gated. I don't make everything an opt-in. I don't make everything a paid opportunity for people to learn from me, because that can often limit the number of people who ever actually get exposed to the work that I do. The more I gatekeep my content behind opt-in sign-up walls or payments, the less people who are likely to find that content. I want people to learn from me and see me and hear me in my zone of genius as much as possible, as often as possible, and for as many people as possible. So my best, most juiciest, most effective content is here in the podcast, is in my content on social media. I do that unafraid that that's going to stop people from wanting to work with me, because I know the value proposition of my offers through and through. And I know that that value proposition isn't just about the information they hear from me. It's about having the opportunity to be mentored by me. It's about that connection that we have inside my paid products and services. You might have noticed that on this podcast, I give lots and lots of practical advice. I am unafraid to share really valuable content with my audience, and the same goes with my content on social media. I know that there's a huge difference between giving advice and sharing information versus being inside my takeoff program and getting my feedback on the actual structure of your webinar, on the niche that you've selected to focus on, helping to review your market research to look for messaging insights that we can then adapt into your content strategy and your marketing plan. There's a huge difference between learning from me through listening to advice versus learning from me in my opt-ins, where I might give a bit more structure. I might walk you through the actual practical steps and strategies to get that implemented. And in my opt-ins, I'm also diving deeper into that light bulb moment, that realization of what it's really going to take to help you achieve that bigger picture goal. Then my paid products and services, my offers, my ways that people can work with me are really focused on that high connection, deeply connected way of facilitating that transformation and getting access to my actual mentorship, connecting with other learners, connecting with me and getting my advice. So if you find yourself in this space where the lead magnet you're creating is just getting too involved, too in-depth, too awesome, see what content you can draw out to actually share with your audience without gating it. Put that heart and soul message into your podcast or onto your social content or into your blog so that more and more people get to witness you and learn from you in your zone of genius. And then remember that you don't have to have everything in one free resource. Really focus on the job that lead magnet needs to do and ensuring you get people to that piece of the puzzle as quickly and efficiently as possible so that they are readily looking for the next logical step. And that next logical step is to actually pay you, is to buy something from you. And that brings me to the last reason why we really want to ensure your lead magnets are crafted and curated to do their job and that you're not putting too much into them. And that is that the more you have inside your lead magnets, the longer it takes me to complete it, the more work I need to do to get to the end point, the longer you're delaying me being able to pay you. And that's the job of a lead magnet, is actually to fill your audience with hot leads who are ready to work with you. So the more you pour into that lead magnet, number one, the more likely you are to decide that you need to charge for it. And then you're completely changing your business model. And that brings other strategy decisions that need to be made, other strategies that need to be implemented for that to actually work and be a validated part of your business model. But also, the longer the gap that you're putting between me grabbing that thing and then buying a VIP package to work with you or buying that next thing. So when the lead magnet is too awesome, let's just remember that we want that lead magnet to be able to do its job, and we want to ensure that we're not gatekeeping all of your best work. Which brings me to your gift for today, day 12 of Tashmas. And today I have some free resources and one special package option that you can purchase if you would like to work together. So the free resources I'm going to link to over with the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/473 are two prior podcast episodes that I did that I think you're going to find really support this particular podcast episode as well. So I've got a podcast episode on which opt-ins are a waste of time. And then I also have a podcast on how to add 100 people to your mailing list really quickly. So those two podcast episodes I'll link to in the show notes of today's episode because I think you might have missed them. They were a little while ago on the podcast and both of them are really, really practical. So it's going to really help you with this. But then also, if you would like to work together on your next lead magnet or on improving an existing lead magnet that you have, I have a special VIP offer for us to work together and do that. And I'm offering it at half price. So in this VIP lead magnet package, you get 3 VIP one-to-one sessions with me, including my help with copywriting, structure, and strategy for your lead magnet. It's just $14.95 Australian dollars, $1,495 Australian dollars plus GST if you're based in Australia for tax purposes. And that is a half price package offer. And there are just 3 of these available. So if you would like to grab the VIP lead magnet package, make sure that you come to the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/473 so that you can grab not only the free resources, but also check out that offer and see if any spaces are still available. And if they are, you can grab one. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. And thank you for joining me for all of Tashmas. Now, if you're listening to this on the day it's released, the 12th of March, number one, make sure you come and say happy birthday over on my Facebook page. I'm one of those weird people who love celebrating birthdays and love being the center of attention rather than just pretending it didn't happen. And also make sure that you do a quick review of all of the Tashmas episodes and particularly all of the gifts, because some of them will be closing today and some of them will be closing in a few days from now. So make sure that you go and double check that you've got everything that you wanted to grab out of the Tashmas gifts before they close. The best way to do that is to head on over to the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/473. Thank you once again. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. And I hope that you've enjoyed this round of Tashmas. Bye for now.